I've been praised a lot for being calm, and lately I'm wondering if that's just another way I learn to stay in control. Because calm looks great on camera, and it's a very efficient way to avoid being affected. And I think some of what we call maturity is just emotional minimalism with better branding. And I didn't notice it at first because, like nothing was wrong, which is exactly the problem. So if you're watching this thinking you have done the work and still feel strangely untouched by your own life, stay. I live a very conscious life. And I don't mean that as a flex. I mean it very literally. I notice how I sleep. I notice how I eat. I notice how I move. I notice how I rest. I notice how I recover. I notice how I feel about all of that. And at some point, I realized I'm never not checking in with myself. I've been teaching and practicing yoga for most of my life, and I still haven't figured this out. There's always a part of me watching, scanning, evaluating. Is this good for me? Is this aligned? Is this supportive? Is this too much? Is this not enough? And again, nothing is wrong. That's what made it so hard to see because this kind of life looks healthy. It looks regulated. It looks very intentional. It looks even like growth. Yet from the inside, it started to feel crowded. Not painfully, not dramatic, just very busy. Care started running in the background like an app I never closed. And this is the strange part. All of this came from wanting to feel better, from wanting to take care of myself, from wanting to live consciously. And something that was supposed to help me slowly started to feel very invasive. Not because it was bad, but because it just never stopped. And I don't think we talk enough about the version of good. The version that doesn't hurt, that doesn't explode, that doesn't burn you out. It just quietly keeps you under observation. And I noticed it in the smallest moments. Mm, Like standing in the kitchen deciding what to eat and realizing I'm not just hungry, I'm evaluating. Or going for a walk and realizing I'm not just walking, I'm optimizing. Mm, Or even lying on the couch and realizing I'm not just resting, I'm monitoring how well I'm resting. And even calm became something to perform correctly. And I caught myself thinking, when did taking care of myself turn into constantly watching myself? What made this harder to notice is that this kind of self awareness is praised. I mean, we call it being conscious, we call it being evolved, we call it emotional intelligence. And I'm not rejecting any of that. I'm just noticing something more underneath it. And at some point, awareness stopped being a doorway and started being kind of a surveillance system, like very quiet, very polite, very respectable. And here's the part that surprised me. The more conscious my life became, the less space there was actually to just be inside it. Not because I was doing too much, but because I was always with myself, like always checking, always adjusting, always refining. And it's subtle. You don't even see it from the outside because from the outside it looks like discipline, like balance, like you're having your life together. But from the inside, it feels like you're never fully off duty. You always have something to do. There are places in my life where I stopped monitoring myself. And my body remembers something I didn't teach it. I don't think this is about wellness or well being or rest or slowness. I think it's about trust, or more precisely, about how easily trust gets replaced by monitoring. Because monitoring feels very responsible and trust feels a little bit more vague. Monitoring feels always like you're doing something. Trust feels like you're letting something happen, you're out of control, even. What made this clearer for me was remembering that this wasn't always how care worked. Like there was a time, not like romantically or perfectly, but simply factually, when well being wasn't something you always tracked. It was something you were just inside of. Like you ate because it was time to eat. You rested because the day slowed down. Or you moved because life asked you to move. Not because you decided it was optimal. It was just because it was normal. And I'm not saying that was better. I'm just noticing how different it feels. Like back then, care lived in the environment and not only in your head. And somewhere along the way, care became more of a personal responsibility and then a personal performance and even a personal identity. And suddenly, you're not just living your life, you're creating it, you're maintaining it, you're watching it. And again, this doesn't this doesn't feel bad enough to just stop. And that's the trick. It just feels very full. And when my body stopped me last year, I didn't get softer. I got more controlling. And what I'm sitting with right now is like it's this one question. Can self-trust still exist inside constant awareness? Or does awareness at a certain point crowd trust out? I don't know the answer yet. And I think that's the part that's hardest for me to sit with. Not because the question is dramatic, but because it refuses to turn into something useful. And I notice how quickly I want to make it productive. How fast my mind reaches for a conclusion, for a framework, for even a next step. You know, something that just sounds like progress. And every time I do that, I feel the same tightening again. Like I'm trying to manage the question instead of letting it work on me. And that's a very familiar reflex there. The reflex to stay competent, to stay composed, to stay slightly ahead of the feeling, because not knowing doesn't look mature. And it doesn't look regulated, and it doesn't look like you're having your life together. So, yet, when I'm honest, the moment I stop trying to resolve this, something else shows up. Not a relief and not clarity, just a different kind of presence, quieter, also less supervised. And that's where it gets very uncomfortable for me. Because if I'm not constantly checking in, constantly adjusting, constantly refining, then something has to be trusted. And trust doesn't give you feedback immediately. I wish. It doesn't reassure you in real time. And also, it doesn't come with proof. It just asks you to stay. So, right now, I'm practicing not turning this into an answer. Not because answers are bad, but because I want to know what happens if I stop trying to earn one. And that's the edge I'm standing at. And I'm deliberately not trying to find one because every time I try to resolve this too quickly, I turn it back into a project. And I notice how tempting it is to say, so the answer is less input, or the answer is doing less, or the answer is going back to basics. And maybe, or maybe not. So, right now, I'm more interested in actually staying with the discomfort, in noticing what it feels like to live inside a very intentional life, and still quietly ask whether intention has started to replace something more instinctive. And this isn't a rejection of consciousness. And it's also not a return to unconsciousness, not at all. It's just a question about proportion, about how much attention is nourishing and how much starts to feel like control. I'm still living this life. I'm still choosing it. I'm just noticing it more honestly now. And I think there's something important about letting that noticing stay unfinished. So I'm going to leave this here, not as a conclusion, not as advice, and not as a takeaway, just as a question I'm living with. What does it mean to take care of yourself without constantly watching yourself to do it? And that's where I am right now.